What is up, everybody? How you doing? Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Palazzo Podcast. Mike Virginia here with Big Ben Chase. How we doing, man?
Hey, it's actually less than 90 degrees out, and it's been over 100 for most of this week, so that's good. We'll take that.
That's right. Thank you guys, everybody, so much for joining. Appreciate it. No Michael Govier today. He's on vacation. We hope he's doing well and enjoying his time off.
Well deserved.
Exactly.
Well deserved
Yeah.
vacation.
Exactly. He does a lot of stuff, a lot of content, and I'm glad he's getting able to take some time for himself. So without further ado, let's dive into some business time real quick. For those of you guys who don't know for the schedule this week, today we got our half-hour show with Ben for the Prospect Show. Tomorrow on the big show it'll be me and Britton at 4 p.m. Eastern, and then Sunday it's going to be me and two special guests for the Week 23 preview. So make sure you join us on that one as well. So I'll tweet out the links. But without further ado, Ben, how's everything going with your fantasy baseball leagues? How you doing?
I've got a couple that I'm in the hunt. One that I just in the last week or so admitted defeat. I'm sitting at 7th in that league, and it's a roto league. Don't really see a path for me to pull that off over the final month. So dropped some guys that I've kind of been hanging on to and went for, instead of having extra good starters, I decided to go in and grab some prospects in that league because it's a dynasty one. So
Nice.
But other than that, life's been keeping me pretty darn busy with everything else going on. We just started high school sports season here. So for a
Nice.
reporter in a small town, that basically takes up 3-4 of your nights per week because you got football and volleyball and everything else. So yeah.
Very cool. Very good. All right. Well, for the show here, let's dive in. For those of you guys who don't know, Ben's going to be talking about some prospects that may have an impact for your fantasy baseball teams coming up in September here. Can't believe it's already September here, Ben. I can't believe we're getting so close to the end of the month. I feel like August flew by. Fantasy baseball season's flying by. Football's coming up. I mean, it's been crazy. But who are some guys that might have? Let's start with your first guy. Who's a guy that you're looking to possibly add, and maybe in some dynasty formats, some deeper redraft leagues? Who's a guy that would potentially be coming up that could help some owners?
Probably more of a dynasty ad than a redraft, but a guy that I think could absolutely help in both formats is Robert Gasser of the Brewers. Lefty, big lefty, awesome stuff. I can't imagine they bring him up the rest of this year in a starter role, but folks that you listen to and that you talk to around the Brewers organizations keep talking about him possibly coming up in a David Price type of role. And everyone remembers how awesome David Price was at the end of the year that he came up as a rookie with the Rays. That's the type of impact that Gasser could have out of the bullpen. You just let him cut loose for an inning or maybe 2 or 3.
Right.
It's going to, one time through the lineup, he's just going to dominate people, and that could absolutely impact your strikeouts. That said, coming into this offseason, you get that kind of performance for a month out of him. Coming into the offseason, if you got him on your dynasty team, that's a huge trade piece because he's likely going to have a rotation spot next year. You've got, I believe, Burns is a free agent and Woodruff isn't. Yep. One of the two of them is. I always flip that around, but
I think it's Corbin.
Yeah. And so you've got one leaving in free agency. They're going to want to have that spot filled with a solid arm. I cannot imagine them going big money for an arm, especially when they got someone like Gasser sitting right there who can step in. If they knew Freddie Peralta was going to be healthy, I don't think they'd have any problems handing over one of the rotation spots to Gasser. But he's a guy who I love watching. Every time he pitches, he comes from a goofy arm angle from the left side. It's really tough for hitters to pick up. Like I said, coming out for 2-3 innings to end this year, I absolutely can see him being a guy that makes a big impact for dynasty teams, especially helping you get those final few strikeouts you need and keep your ratios where they need to be the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too, like, where does he project long term? Like, if he comes up in a David Price role, I know you just got finished saying that he's a guy that could potentially be in the starting rotation. Maybe if they let Corbin walk, where does he? I guess my question is where does he rank? Like, is he an ace guy? Is he a 2, 3, 4? Like, is he going to have an impact for fantasy teams next year?
Yeah, I think what you're looking at, people get really turned off this comparison because of his 2023 season. But think what Lance Lynn was for about the last 5 years. A guy who could put you up a ton of innings, a crap ton of strikeouts, and would give you average-ish whip and ERA. That's really the type of guy that Gasser could be. He's got another level potentially to where he could get to be a co-ace. I don't know about an ace in fantasy leagues, but that type of guy that's a number 2 or co-ace on a regular rotation that's a really good fantasy number 2, number 3. I could absolutely see that role. But, if you guys have had Lance Lynn in, say, like 2000 through 2002 or 2020 through 2022, he's been that's the type of pitcher we're talking about. A guy who can rack up 200 plus strikeouts and is got the type of body and frame and everything to just go out there and pitch every 5 consistently and give you those. He's going to have some home run stuff because he comes from that goofy angle and sometimes it can flatten out. But otherwise it's really, there's going to be a lot of strikeouts just because he gets a goofy angle because of his arm angle. He gets a goofy angle on his slider. And so that is just almost an unhittable pitch, but he's got to locate everything else along with it. And he's really done well as the season has gone on, locating in AAA. And that was kind of an issue to start the year, but he's gotten so much better as the year's gone on. Like I said, I think for sure you're talking a middle rotation type of guy that could eventually potentially might actually be a better fantasy pitcher than a real life pitcher, just because he's probably a mid rotation guy in real life. But fantasy wise, because of those strikeouts, he's going to definitely be a better impact.
Right. And so it sounds like this is somebody for us to obviously keep an eye on Dynasty this year, but maybe for some redraft formats next year, somebody we could be maybe taking a shot on.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, cool. Good stuff. Thanks you guys for joining so far. We got a couple people in the live chat asking some questions. Chad wants to know, Charlie Soto has fallen to round 3. He's a strict upgrade on the fading Griff McGarry, right?
Boy, McGarry just has lost where the plate exists over the last 3 weeks, which is just a shame because the Phillies need arms. I could see McAble being another guy. I'm not bringing him up here because I still think he's got some. I think they prefer to keep him in the rotation, whereas McGarry, I could see them liking him in the bullpen. And boy, if he would have kept performing the way he was in June and July, I think he's an automatic for the Phillies to throw into their bullpen down the stretch here to try and push for a higher spot in the playoffs. But that's not happening. Charlie Soto, the one thing to say, you're talking about a teenager going into the minor leagues. You've got Griff McGarry, who's in the upper minors. He's shown that he can make it through full season ball and everything else and have really good numbers. Charlie Soto hasn't yet, but he's also a teenager with a ton of upside. You're playing kind of a risk card there either way. McGarry's probably got a pretty decent floor as a reliever, but may not be a starter. Whereas Soto, you're talking a guy who's almost certainly they want him to be a starter, but he's probably 4 or 5 years away. So just it depends on what you're looking for in your fantasy league or your dynasty league there. So
right. Great. Excellent. And again, for those of you guys who are just joining, Ben and I are talking about some guys that could potentially have an impact on your leagues this year, and obviously for your dynasty and redraft. Again, that's what the show's about today for the prospects. Ben, who's your second guy that you want to talk about today?
Next one is going to be probably a guy that my only issue bringing him up even is that people get way too excited because of the prospect type, and that's Pete Crow Armstrong. And one of those guys. One of the absolute best defenders you will see in, I don't care, minor league or major league baseball. The guy can just go get it in center field.
Yep.
The thing is, who's the best offensive player for the Chicago Cubs right now?
Cody Bellinger.
Yeah. What position does he play?
Center field.
Yeah. And so you're either bumping Cody to a corner spot or first base. I mean, granted, he could absolutely handle first base. Yeah. But you're likely bumping him to a corner spot in order to bring up Pete Crow Armstrong and then benching someone like Ian Happ, who, yeah, Happ hasn't had an amazing year, but you're still talking a guy who's got a 104 OPS plus. So, I mean, he's had a rough year and is still an above average hitter. PCA is going to bring all kinds of defense, and I want to see that defense. I'm a defense junkie. I love watching really good defenders do their thing, but I don't know. I would love to see him get the full call up to the majors. If he's there, this is a guy that can, if you want to project out what a 10 home run, 25, 30 stolen base guy looks like over a month, that's really what you could maybe expect out of PCA. But he's going to be if he's up, he's going to be playing a lot because of his defense. He's not going to sit very often is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I'm guilty as charged. I love Pete Crow Armstrong. I loved him coming into the season as well, and I'm with you that he's a defensive stud. But at the same time, too, like you had mentioned, like especially in that outfield with the Cubs, and I know they're in the thick of things for the wild card, right? And they're fighting for a playoff spot. Where do you fit him in, right? So I for me personally, as a fan of baseball, I would love for him to call up and watch him just roam the outfield and help him out defensively. I just don't know where he plays. So,
and I mean, I don't know. You look at their lineup. About the only spot they're getting below average production is first base, and that's even improved since they acquired Candelario. So, right. I mean, their lineup right now is stacked with guys that are all giving you above average production. And so that's the difficulty, is you're likely taking an offensive hit potentially. Once again, right. This is a rookie coming up. You don't know. He might come out and go gangbusters for a month, but you don't know that. And the team definitely does. The team knows whether or not this is a guy to pay attention to. So
agreed. Agreed.
But yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, man. All right. So we have another question. Jamie wants to know, would there be any good call-ups before the season ends that would help a guy in a deeper setting? Jamie, I assume you're talking redraft. But that's what we're talking about today. Some of these guys that we're chatting about are some guys that could potentially help your teams. Again, it's worth noting too, with the new collective bargaining agreement and keeping guys under, a certain amount of plate appearances and things like that. Some of these guys who are going to be calling up, who knows if they have full-time spots, who knows if their production sets in. So a lot of these guys that are coming up, and Ben, I don't know if you agree with me or not here, but at least in my personal take, anybody that's going to be coming up, they're just going to try to get seasoning on to get them some major league experience. They're going to monitor their at-bats. Anybody who's in the playoff hunt already as is, i.e. somebody who's got a good lead on the division. I doubt we see anybody really impactful rookies down the stretch in the last month of the season here. But Ben, I'm interested to hear your take there.
I think that's where we're at. You might see some guys come back up that have been up already.
Right.
I don't think the Red Sox are in it, but if you're going to ask me, is David Hamilton or Ceddanne Rafaela coming up? I'm probably going to take David Hamilton. He's been up. He actually wasn't terrible while he was up. Yeah, his batting average was terrible, which drug down everything else. But you're talking about an ungodly fast guy who had like a 230 BABIP. I don't think that's going to happen long term with him. He's going to be a guy that posts really good BABIPs. But I don't know as far as those quality clubs where you're seeing a guy fit in. But there are plenty of clubs that are struggling toward the end of the season, and you're seeing there's a good chance you could see someone you brought up when we were talking ahead of things, you brought up Jordan Lawler, and to me, the Diamondbacks are just sinking like a rock right now. And that's sad. I loved what they did early in the year. They're a really fun, exciting young team. Jordan Lawler has really done well all year long. Really hasn't hit that block. He started off the year in his block is what he did. And then he's just kind of consistently played better and better all year long. And he's walking more than he's striking out in granted just 7 games in AAA, but since his promotion, he's got a couple home runs, a couple steals, and he's walking more than he's striking out. that's a guy that could maybe come up to a team that's on the fringe.
Yep.
But even then, do they sacrifice defense to put him at short? Do they put him at third and then you're bumping somebody else? You end up in one of those tough situations like we talked about with Pete Crow. You don't know what a rookie is going to give you if you're on the fringe or you're competing. I can't imagine a guy like that gets full-time unless he's going absolutely bazonkers, and then he's going to be really tough to pick up because somebody's going to, we're down to the part of the year where everyone's got, the guys who have fab dollars left. There's one guy in your stinking league out of your $100 fab. He's got 84, and he's going to drop 84 on Jordan Lawler and just blow everyone out of the water. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Right. And it's funny too, because and it's so funny you mentioned that some of the guys who have already been called up possibly making a return. Like I could definitely see Colton Cowser maybe coming up, back up to help the Rose, but Matt Mervis, like some and even with these guys, I don't know if they're going to get full-time roles either. Like I think what you saw with Colton Cowser earlier in the season is probably what you're going to get out of him if they were decided to bring him up in September, just as a depth spot to give a couple, some guys some days off, maybe Cedric Mullins, and same thing with Matt Mervis, try to get his bat in the lineup against, he's going to sit against lefties, he'll be in there against some righties and hopes that he can find his power stroke there. But I totally agree with that take. I think you'll see more guys that we've already seen probably come up and be more impactful than some of the other rookies. One guy I did want to ask you about real quick, and I know Adolis Garcia went on the IL. Is it possible that we see Evan Carter for the Rangers come up in September?
God, I would love that. I've just been such a huge fan of his. He is one of my favorite players to watch. The thing that I do believe might preclude him coming up is that they are so stacked with depth. And it's not just him. I mean, let's be honest, Robbie Grossman's their primary DH, and he's not a bad outfielder. No. You could throw him into left field, and quite frankly, he might play left field better than Adolis does or plays a corner. But you got guys like Ezekiel Duran. They could bring up Josh Smith again. You got a lot of these depth guys that,
Leody Taveras.
Yeah, and we've seen Bubba Thompson. JP Martinez is up. We've got a lot of this depth right now. I have a feeling they're going to let that work out the rest of this year. And if, like you said, if Adolis is missing some time, they're probably going to lean harder on throwing Mitch Garver at DH and Robbie Grossman in the outfield, and that's probably more the route they go.
Hey, a guy can dream, right, Ben? Like I love Evan Carter so much. I'm with you. He's one of my favorite prospects right now.
Oh yeah. And the great part is, if you listen to any interview he has ever done, the guy is so stinking humble. It is almost sickening. But he's one of those guys that I don't know if there's anything he does where you just go, holy shit. But he does a whole lot of things that you're like, damn, like that's nice. Like that guy's going to hit 25, 30 home runs. Nice. He's going to probably steal 20 bases. Nice. He's going to hit 300. Nice. I don't think he's a guy that's going to put up with 350, but he's going to hit you 300. That's just going to be really impressive to watch. So.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about him. I mean, maybe we don't see him this year. I mean, he is only 20 years old. It's worth noting that he is hitting 281 on the season, 13 home runs, 62 RBIs, 22 stolen bases. I love him. He's one of my top guys heading into next year. Hopefully the Rangers find a spot for him, but I just love watching that guy hit and actually just play baseball. I mean, as a baseball fan, he's awesome to watch. So before we get into your next guy here, Ben, Jamie also wants to know, so would you keep Mateo over Mason Wynn? Other shortstops I have are McLean and Tovar. I'd like to pick up an outfield player. If you're talking about Jorge Mateo, he's been a cut for me for a while now. Just the playing time is not there. He really only offers you speed, and even that's kind of shaky at best. Mateo probably should have been cut probably a while back. Same thing with Mason Wynn. We talked about him actually last night. I was on the Triple Play Pod. And I think Ben actually even brought this up too a while back when he got the call. He's more of a real life player than a fantasy player this year. So I don't like either of those shortstops. You have both. I mean, I would be looking to maybe, especially if you have McLean and Tovar, I'm fine with cutting either or both of them.
Frankly, and that's just a great comparison right there. Mason Wynn and PCA could be very, very similar players rest of year.
Good call.
They're both just defensive studs. and their contributions are going to likely be a lot stronger on that side of the ball as a debut. Now, that doesn't mean that long term, I think that there isn't a chance that those guys get better, but the rest of this year, I wouldn't guarantee anything more than a defensive focused contribution to their team.
So. Yeah, agreed. JHook703 says, I've been a Ronnie Mauricio doubter, but still seems a bit strange that he doesn't get a shot. Yeah, I'd be shocked if we don't see him in September, to be honest. But same thing, I doubt the playing time is going to be there, and especially in a format where you're going to feel confident starting him. In dynasty leagues, obviously you're hanging on to him and excited that he gets the call to see what he's got. But I doubt he sees enough playing time to be rosterable, I guess, in September. But interested to hear your take there too, Ben.
And that's actually going to bring me to a guy that I hadn't even mentioned to you, but looking over some things today, I don't think Luis Angel Acuna comes up to the majors, but I could see them pushing him up to AAA. And basically, he and Ronnie Mauricio are very, very, very similar profiles. So it wouldn't make sense to stick them both in AAA. There's a good chance for Ronnie to come up, get some run at least. Like I said, I don't know that it's a full-time run, but the Braves just got done playing the Mets. I just watched the Mets for 3 games, and I'm sorry, but you can find a spot for Ronnie Mauricio on that team. There's so many blank holes in their lineup right now that he could absolutely fill in.
Where would you play him if you're Buck Showalter? Where does he play?
And that's just it. Is I don't know how much time he's ever had at third. But I'm sorry, Mark Vientos isn't the answer defensively there at all.
Agreed.
He can move in the outfield. He's shown that. He's got some instinct out there as a defensive outfielder. I wouldn't put him in center necessarily, but he would be at least kind of an asset. The only thing is, of the like random guys that are getting any playing time, DJ Stewart might be the only one who's doing anything offensively. Although I gotta say, his Wednesday performance on the bases and in the field may have been the most comical that I've ever seen of a Mets outfielder, and that's saying a lot. He tripped on his way back to second, got thrown out on the bases, and then I don't know, he just about fell over the top of himself trying to get a ball that Vaughn Grissom hit to the outfield, which turned it into a triple. So, I mean, he's definitely not a defensive guy out there, but when you've got guys like Daniel Vogelbach on your team, there's nowhere to play that guy defensively. So DJ Stewart has to play somewhere defensively.
Agreed. And it's I mean, like you said, he's been hitting the hell out of the ball, and he's a he played with Buck in Baltimore. He's 29 years old. We talked about him again yesterday too. I mean, obviously the production is not sustainable with this pace that he's at right now. But again, I've always said this. I said this last night. I'll say here: you ride the wave with some of these guys. You know, obviously, if you're desperate for power, you ride these guys until the wheels fall off, and then you cut them for somebody else. So,
and that previous history with Buck is going to be a big thing, because
agreed. 100%.
That's going to be tough for Mauricio to break in there and get that spot when you got Stewart there, and Buck knows Stewart knows what he can do and can't do. He doesn't know what this rookie can do. So, you know that. Yeah, that's Yup. So,
yep, absolutely. Well said, Chad. Chad says, I remember when he was a 40 home run upside top prospect. Yeah. With Baltimore, I was excited when he came up. And actually, I really, really liked him when he first came up with us. And I was thinking to myself, like, hey, this guy could be a cornerstone piece for us. And he played decently in Baltimore, but could just never get it to stick. And I think that same scenario probably happens in New York as well. So, Ben, let's dive into your next guy. Who do you got?
So, next one I'm going to look at is more not necessarily for your major league fantasy club, but someone for your dynasty that you can get a really nice look at the rest of the way. And actually, I'm going to mention kind of two with this. There's a number of guys who stuck at one level all year long and are producing out of their minds. Jacob Melton of the Astros, who's now their top prospect after they had some big trades, and then Spencer Jones of the Yankees have both been at high A all year long. I could absolutely see their team saying, hey, you know what? We're going to bump you up to Double A. We're going to let you see a little bit of upper minors pitching as the year gets done. And then we'll know what we've got from you going forward. I mean, that could be a huge thing for either one of them fast tracking their path going forward. I don't see it helping your major league team at all this year. But that could mean that Melton or Jones is a guy that you think about halfway through next year. If they can show well at AA, they're going to be on a fast track starting next year. It's just a matter of they need to have that experience, and they've been at high A all year this year, which is kind of crazy because both, I think, are 23. So, I mean, they're not young chickens just sitting out there. They need to get some run at the upper minors to kind of show they can handle it.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Obviously not going to be and either of those players are going to be guys that help you this year, but definitely somebody to keep your eye on as they progress through the minors there. Ben, one guy I want to ask you about, since we're talking about the Astros, and a guy who got dealt from the Astros to the New York Mets in the Verlander trade, Drew Gilbert of the New York Mets, in AA right now. I don't think we see him this year. 22 years old. He's an outfielder, lefty bat, 284 in the minors right now. 15 home runs, 51 RBIs, and 11 stolen bases. Is this somebody that you're high on going into next season? Maybe as if the Mets just decide to go full in with the youth movement. Do you like Drew Gilbert?
I adore Drew Gilbert, but in the way that, frankly, that causes people who don't like the Mets to hate Brandon Nimmo, and for Mets fans to absolutely love Brandon Nimmo. This is a guy that's going to go all out every play. And you absolutely love watching Drew Gilbert play the big game of baseball. But I think you're going to be overjoyed if he gives you 20 home runs. He's going to give you 10 steals too. That's not a terrible player. And he's going to control the strike zone enough to where he's going to hit for a decent average, get on base. But there's not going to be that. He's not a 30 home run guy. He's not a 30 steal guy. He's not a 300 type of guy. And frankly, he kind of goes nuts enough in the field that he's probably going to have dings up every so often. He's going to end up running into a wall, chasing a ball every so often that you're like, God dang it. Now I miss him for, a week and a half because he's so after it. But in the clubhouse, his energy is absolutely contagious. As a player on the field, he's going to go all out to get you that extra base. And a lot of times that's going to mean more runs for your offense and potentially in fantasy, but probably he's going to be more of like a 6-hitter or something like that. And so he's not going to be a guy who's at the top of the lineup scoring 90 runs, but from, lower in the lineup, he's going to be an excellent base runner that keeps things moving. Just a lot of those basic baseball skills that you love to watch be done, he does them in droves. And he's got all kinds of goofy excitement to his game as well that's kind of fun to watch as well.
Right. Real quick, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What current player would you compare him to now in terms of like what kind of player is Drew Gilbert? Like who would you compare him to as a player in the minors or the majors now? I mean,
well, it's just the attitude and effort is kind of your Brandon Nimmo type. Like I think he can end up being the type of guy that can handle center field, but he's probably raw skill wise. You would think that he should be a corner guy. He doesn't have blazing speed, but he's just he gives 100% effort. He thinks through things well enough that he can probably stick in center. Right. I don't think Nimmo has ever really shown speed well, but he does. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in their games, quite frankly, but think with just a little more power. So, I mean, that's just, I think he's got a legit chance to hit 20, whereas that's a hell of a year for Brandon Nimmo to grab 20 home runs. But
I saw a good player comp. I was just doing a quick Google search that he got compared to like a Cole Calhoun and Adam Eaton. Like, do you agree with that take?
Calhoun would be an excellent comparison. Adam Eaton was I think folks forget just how freaking speedy Adam Eaton was when he first came up.
Yeah,
it didn't always translate to stolen bases, but the guy was racking up double-digit triples, and I just don't think Gilbert has that kind of speed. But if you want to go into fantasy impact, absolutely, I could see that being a fantasy impact profile.
Cool. Excellent. Moving on, really quick, I wanted to ask your thoughts on another player here. And again, I'm a little bit biased here for my own sake here, but is there a possible? And I know I asked you this earlier before we hopped on the show, maybe last night, I think. And it's been rumblings in Baltimore that it possibly could happen. They asked Mike Elias this during a game over last weekend, I believe, if there is a potential that Jackson Holiday gets the call to help this team in September. I personally don't think it's going to happen. Mike Elias is a really, really smart GM. And I think they're going to be careful with him in terms of, again, letting him development, giving him enough time. I would be shocked if we see him come up this year. But any thoughts to that? Is there a chance, even a slight chance that we see him? I would imagine it would have to take a significant injury to get him up.
That's just it. And I was just going to say, I was listening to, now I'm going to have to, one of the athletic podcasts. They were talking, and I don't remember if it was Rates and Barrels or if it was one of their other daily shows. They're talking about the fact that Joey Ortiz isn't up. They don't have room for a guy like Joey Ortiz, who's an absolutely elite defender and not a nothing with the bat. And they don't have room for him up in the majors right now because they have such depth in infielders. Now, you can argue that they could cut a couple of those guys and not really hurt themselves, but they're also, Jorge Mateo is a guy who he has really good clubhouse presence, and folks love that about him. He does a lot of things well in the clubhouse. Yeah. Offensively, he's not giving you a lot. Defensively, he was excellent last year. He's not really shown up and been the same guy this year with the glove.
You're right.
But that's got to be, that's a guy, he's a glue guy in the clubhouse, and I can't imagine them getting rid of Gilbert getting rid of Mateo for that reason. So that's going to be the difficulty, is you kind of need to get rid of some of the Ramon Urias, the
Adam Frazier's, those kinds of guys off your team. Yeah.
And some of these guys with a young team like this, it's tough to get rid of those guys, because a good manager says, I need those guys in my clubhouse. And especially if I remember right, isn't Hyde something like 40 years old?
Yeah, he's a young guy too. For a manager wise,
to have some guys that have some veteran experience that can say, "Hey, this is the way we play," to back up your manager, who's likely younger than any manager these guys saw on the way up the system.
He's 49.
Okay, so see, there you go. There's a good chance they didn't see a manager this young on their way up the system, and now they're playing for a guy who's less than 40 years old, and not that much older than some of his players. And so that allows him to have that kind of in between of a 22-year-old listening to a 39-year-old, which is like,
exactly.
But that 22-year-old listening to a 32-year-old, well, now you kind of have a bridge in the middle there. And you kind of like to have that as a young manager.
Totally agree with that take in terms of just having that veteran presence in the clubhouse and on the field, right? Like Ramon Urias is a stellar third baseman in the glove, maybe not so much with the bat, but he can play some third base, and he's great with the glove out there. Jorge Mateo is a good speedy guy. Like I said, he didn't get a bunt down the other night. He's cost us some plays in terms of defensively out in the field. Short and center. I get they're trying to get some speed injected in that lineup because he really is impactful on the base pass. But I agree with that take 100%. You're going to have to get rid of some of these guys to bring up a guy like, Jackson Holiday, Kobe Mayo, Connor Norby, any of those guys. I doubt we see any of them this year. Even Kjerstad, I would be shocked if we see him too. I think what we probably see from Baltimore is get a guy like Colton Cowser back up here and kind of see if what he's got and see if he's figured it out. But
and quite Ben, frankly, I think you might see a move with Holiday getting promoted to AAA.
Agreed.
That could 100% happen to where he's really excelled at every single level so far this year. Why not give him a little bit of run at AAA to end the year and just see what he's got? Because as much time as he's had this year, I would be really surprised if they send him out as a 19-year-old, if they send him out to the Arizona Fall League, because he's already played so much this year, and they're kind of looking at him as a guy who can contribute in the majors next year. So I cannot imagine that they send him out to Arizona and say, hey, go have some fun out there, because sadly we saw last year, why is it blanking from my head? But we saw a fairly impactful prospect end up getting hurt, and is now not the same guy as he was when he went out last year and was kind of on the radar. I don't know why that's leaving my head. I just wrote this up Aaron Zavala.
Yes.
Aaron Zavala went out to Arizona Fall League, got hurt. And when Aaron Zavala showed up out there, you could have made the argument that if you're going to pick up a guy, and that's another great point with Norfolk. But if you're going to pick up a guy between he and Evan Carter who could have made an impact in the 2023 season, you would have picked Zavala just because of the skill set. I mean, he's a guy who could play a few different positions, was getting on base at a nuts rate, and then he got hurt. And he just hasn't been the same this year coming back. I can't imagine the Baltimore takes that risk with Holiday and sends him out there. They would much rather send him up to AAA, let him get some run all the way through the AAA playoffs. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get him some extra at-bats that way, so you're in a controlled team environment that way. And then give him the offseason, have him come back early for spring training, and we'll see what he's going to do. So.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that take. I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to ask you about two more prospects this year and see if we can get mainly one that I don't think we see actually either of these guys across the Beltway here in Baltimore in the Washington Nationals with Dylan Cruz and James Wood. Do we see those guys potentially come up next year? Like, what's your ETA for these guys is my question.
I honestly, the way I've watched Dylan now swing a couple of times in the minors, and that he's a major league bat right now. I mean, he just absolutely is. It's absolutely
that's why I'm
nuts.
asking this. Yeah. Because if you watch him, like it looks like he's been a major leaguer already for like years now. And I'm like, holy shit, dude, this guy just got drafted, So
I can 100% see him breaking opening day next year. But I would wager that just like Holiday, he's going to likely end up capped out in AAA this year. And probably there's a guy who very well might go to Arizona because he hasn't gotten a ton of at-bats as a pro yet. So going to the Arizona Fall League for Dylan Cruz could absolutely be in the cards. And similar, James Wood, if I remember, he missed some time at one point this year. Mm-hmm. So that could be another way for him to kind of get his, I guess if you want to say 500 or so at-bats on the year, is to send him out there. He's actually got 464 plate appearances. So he's gotten quite a bit of a run. But for sure to get both of them up to AAA and then to kind of say, okay, well, now maybe one of these goes out to Arizona, maybe both of them. But if nothing else, I think Cruz is going to be the guy who's on the faster track for simple purposes being, you still got James Wood striking out almost 100. Well, he will strike out over 150 times this year.
Right. But a 6'6", 240 outfielder, that's, a 240-pound outfielder. The guy's just a beast. So I'm excited to kind of see him. I mean, those are my two favorite prospects right now with the Nationals. The Nationals actually have a really bright future ahead of them with the prospects that they have between Cruz, James Wood, Elijah Green, who I really liked coming out of, I believe, last year's draft. He's only 19 years old. Yeah, he has. And again, I think that's that comes with him being so young, and obviously, some of the pressure of him being a top pick, but he'll figure it out. I think. Robert Hassel, I like a lot too. But again, it's Brady House is another guy. I mean, the Nationals got a lot of young talent in that farm.
Absolutely,
and I'm excited to see how
I'm
excited to see how they all pan out. But Ben, anybody else you want to talk about before we head out?
I really don't. Frankly, I'm going to bring up, just because I want to get folks hyped up so that we get a pretty good crowd for next week. Jim Callis is going to be with us next week. Now, we're probably not going to be doing as much player-centric questions next week, because the reason I'm bringing Jim on is Jim's been in this business for years, and he's been in all sorts of angles with it. And he can talk about what's changed in evaluating prospects in the last 30 years, which is just a nuts perspective to have. But he's been there. He's been through the Baseball America, through the pipeline, and through all these areas, and how teams have changed, and how writing about a prospect and evaluating prospects has changed. So he's good. That's the purpose for having Jim on. And I kind of told him that is when I invited him on, and he really liked that idea. So I think that it will be a fun chat with him to just
kind
of talk about, where prospecting has come from and going to. So get hyped, invite your friends.
Yeah. I'm pumped, man. I'm definitely gonna be attending that one too. And I've loved the guests that you guys have brought on. Ben, in my opinion, you're one of the best in the game regarding prospects, man. And you really give a good, honest, detailed analysis for all of these guys. And I know our listeners on the Palazzo podcast love hearing about it. JHook703, I just want to make sure I address this question. How in the heck do these guys how in the heck do these guys make it with these guys in the way?
Yeah.
It's not going to be hard for one, but
I was going to say, I think the Nationals could cut every name on that list and probably not miss a step.
Right.
Another guest I want to mention here quick that's coming up, Mike, before we close out.
Please.
I just got a confirmation before we came on air from Jared Perkins. And Jared does a lot of work with mental health in baseball. And for those of you who've been following kind of what's going on with college right now, college conferences are going ballistic. They're being blown up. And in 2024, you're going to have UCLA playing against Rutgers, which is freaking nuts. But what folks don't understand is, for football, okay, that's one day that they got to worry about, maybe one extra day for travel. Something like baseball and softball, they play Friday, Saturday, Sunday series. Add in a day of travel each way. And you're talking about very, very frequently college student athletes are going to have 5 days out of their week that disappear for a weekend series.
Yep.
And there's been a lot written about how that's going to affect mental health of players trying to stay with their grades and keep up with things as they're also, I was a college athlete. It's a full-time job just being an athlete, let alone doing your classes on top of it. So
absolutely.
I talked with Jared. I think he'll be an excellent guest talking about and then we can kind of get into some of the minor league guys. Jared's got tremendous. He's got a podcast that folks should check out, talking with players about their experiences coming up. But he will be an excellent guest. That's going to happen sometime in September. I told Govier about it, and he's like, I am coming on when Jared is on. And so we got to figure out when we're having this pod going forward with Govier's new work schedule. But that's coming in September at some point. So
that'll be fun, man. And for those of you guys who don't know, Govier's in that space as well, and with his new job in the mental health space too. So I'm really interested to see how those guys interact and their takes on certain things as well. So that'll be a fun podcast as well. A lot of exciting things coming up on Palazzo, man. I love the guests that you've brought on. I enjoy doing these shows with you. I know when Govier's not able to make it and I'm able to pop on here and talk with you, man, I always get so hyped with all these prospects that are coming up.
Just pop that up because Joe mentioned it. So behind the scenes is Perkins podcast. Yeah, he does a great job with it.
Yeah, so good stuff, man. All right, well, hey Ben, it's been super fun, man. This has been awesome. I love doing these shows with you. I'd love to have you on the main show too, just to talk about some of these young guys as well, if we can schedule some time with you. But for those of you guys again who came in late, no Michael again tomorrow for the main show. It's going to be me and Britton Allen. We're going to be talking about some guys that can help your fantasy baseball teams the last month of the season here, some guys that are trending up and some guys that are trending down. We got a really, really good show for you guys, so make sure that you guys attend, book your calendars. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then Sunday we'll be doing the Week 23 preview show with myself, Tyler London, and a special guest potentially. Time on that still TBD. But Ben, thank you again, man. It's been super fun. And
thanks for stepping in.
Yeah, man, absolutely happy to do it. For everybody else, get in the Discord here. Get on Twitter. Follow me, MKB Fantasy on Twitter. Big Gentle Ben for Ben over there, or X, if you will, not Twitter anymore. And then get in our Discord. We want to help. It's a great group of guys who know their stuff with baseball and want to help you win your fantasy baseball championships. If you haven't done so already, make sure you'd like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're on our quest to 1,000. We want to get there. Tell your friends, steal their phones, hit subscribe, help us out. Ben, have a good weekend, man. Thanks a lot. Everybody else, see you guys later. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.